Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome here. It is now 10 o'clock, so I am going to start this class for today. The last one for this year or for this semester. Once again, thank you for being here. Learning Unit 11 is not a difficult learning unit, so I think we are going to go through it very quickly, and then I will also give opportunity for questions after I've done the presentation, and I will also provide an overview of what you can expect in the examination. It is not different from the information that I sent to you in the announcement or the email that was sent to your MyLife email address. It contains more or less the same information, but I will just run through it quickly as well. Right, so today we are going to look at Learning Unit 11, which is on the financial indicators. So if we look at the financial indicators, of course, it concerns our government budget. That is what we look at, how that has changed, what are the income of the government and what are the ways in which the money is spent, what are the different expenditure forms of the government. So we focus on fiscal indicators, and these fiscal indicators are published by different institutions for different purposes. So it's also necessary that we understand that when we look at the fiscal indicators and that we consider for which purposes the different indicators are collected. So information can be found on the National Treasury's website. They provide a budget review, they provide the medium-term budget policy statement, the national revenue and expenditure and borrowing on a monthly basis. But that information, when you are looking for it, it is rather difficult to compile a series. So you will have to go into the different budget reviews for every year if you want to compile a series. The stats are not published in a, how can I put it, convenient way, as do the South African Reserve Bank when they publish the information in their quarterly bulletin. So the public and also the national account section also contains information on the government's budget, and that information is easier to use for economists because it is easier to download in the form of a series and consider it. But of course, it's not as complete as the information that is available on the National Treasury's website. If you go and look into those budgets, you will see there's really a wealth of information available there. And it's really worth your while to go and have a look. It's quite interesting also to see how government's budget is compiled, where the revenue come from, where how they spend the money. So go and have a look at that. It's also interesting to see how it has changed over time. And then there are also separate publications by SARB on tax and finance statistics that you can go and have a look at. Right, these are all discussed in your textbook as well. So if we look at the public sector, it consists of different sections. So if we look at the central government, which is the national government department, as well as these extra budgetary institutions are also included in the central government. So the Financial and Fiscal Commission, the HSRC, the Unemployment Insurance Fund, the Road Accident Fund, and then also universities and universities of technology. They form part of the central government. Then when we add the provincial and local governments, that is then called the general government. So the central government is sort of just the national government departments, and then the general government includes provincial and local governments. And then when we look at the broad public sector, we also include the public corporations, which include Eskom, Denel, Rand Water, SABC, SA Post Office, as well as Transnet. So that is the composition of the public sector. So when we look at statistics of the government sector, we have to consider that there are different data systems. So the first one is the system of national accounts. So that is a macroeconomic accounting system that focuses on measuring production, income, and expenditure, and avoiding double counting. So that is where the GDP is measured. So activities are measured on an accrual basis. In other words, regardless of when the payment occurs, and it is published in the South African Reserve Bank quarterly bulletin. Then there is also the Government Finance Statistic Manual. Those figures focus on public finance rather than macroeconomic concepts, and they are published by the National Treasury in the Budget Review, also by Statistics South Africa, and by the Reserve Bank Quarterly Bulletin in the Public Finance section. So that is the difference between the two sections that include information on the government sector. Then, to make things even more difficult, there are also different accounting periods. So there is the fiscal year, which runs from 1 April to 31st of March. Then there is also the tax year, which runs from 1 March to 28 February. And then, of course, there's the normal year, which runs from 1 January to 31st of December. So you will see that for some of the information that is provided on the public sector, sometimes they will provide information that indicates it's for the year ending 31 March. So then you know it's for the fiscal year. Sometimes it's indicated it's for the year ending 28 February, so you will know it's for the tax year. And sometimes they publish the figures also for a normal year, so ending on 31 December. If we look at the information that is available in the budget review, so this is just a summary of the information that you can find in the budget review. This information is also published at the beginning of the budget review. So you can see there's information on government revenue, how much was collected through personal tax, how much through corporate income tax, or how much is being planned, because this is for 2024-25, how much is planned to be collected through value-added tax, and then also taxes on international trade and transaction. Then there are some non-tax revenue that's indicated, provincial social security funds and public entities revenue that's indicated. So all that information is provided in the budget review. And then, of course, more detailed information can be found in the full review. There is some information on macroeconomic performance and productions, a very complete summary on the consolidated fiscal framework, which shows the revenue, the expenditure, the budget balance, and then also the gross domestic expenditure. So this information can be very helpful if you want to look at how these different posts have changed over time. How has government revenue changed over time? How has expenditure changed? How has the budget balance changed over time? And what percentage does it comprise of GDP, which are indicated there. Right, then they also provide information on the division of the nationally raised revenue, so you can go and have a look at that information. Here is some information on the expenditure side. So you can see that for the 2024-25 budget, the plan is to spend 2.37 trillion rand, of which 1.41 trillion rand will go towards social services. So you can see that the government is really trying to make a contribution to improving the quality of life in the country. 255.4 billion is allocated towards economic development, 244.0 million towards peace and security, 480.6 billion towards learning and culture. So you can see it's a huge part of the budget that goes towards learning and culture, the largest part of which goes to basic education. Quite a large part also goes to NSFAS, and then also to universities, and then also to other different kinds of learning and culture. And then also quite a large amount that is spent on health in the country, despite the fact that we know that there are still some issues with the health system. Then there's also information provided on tax rates. So this is just an indication of what you can do with these tax rates. So for every year, the government publish the taxes that will be paid depending on your level of income. And if you compare this, you can see that this has not changed, as was indicated in the budget speech. This has not changed from the previous year, which means that people are actually paying a little bit more tax due to the fact that the income has decreased in real terms due to inflation, but the amount of tax that they pay have not changed. They still pay the same amount of tax. So usually these are adjusted to make room for the fact that inflation has lowered real income. So if we consider a person called Jake who earns 250,000 Rand per annum, we can see that his income falls into that bracket because it's 250,000. It's between 237,101 and 370,500. So the way in which you will calculate it, you will take that 42678 and then 26% of the amount that he earned higher than 237. So you have to take 250,000 minus 237,100 and calculate 26% of that. Add that to the 42,678 that he will pay on the first 2,037 Rand, 100 Rand that he earned, and that is how you will calculate your tax. So if you know what your income level is and you have these tables, you can calculate the amount of tax that you will have to pay. So this information is also published in the budget review. Then government expenditure consists of different types of expenditure. The first is government consumption expenditure. It includes government expenditure on individual consumption goods and services, so on things that relate to individuals such as education, health and welfare, and then expenditure on collective expenditure such as defense, law and order and public administration. So that is not for a specific person, but it is a collective type of expenditure. It also includes the compensation of employees of the government and payments for goods and services. So that's government consumption expenditure. Then households we will also have consumption expenditure, but also have capital spending or investment. The government also have that part, and it's actually an important part of government's expenditure. So that is fixed investment by the government in infrastructure. So that includes building roads, building, supplying transport systems, supplying hospitals, building schools. All of that will come as part of capital spending of the government. So that is really where we can see, if that is increasing, we can see that our economy is growing and that the more infrastructure is supplied in order to improve the quality of life of the people in the country. And then current expenditure by the government includes the consumption expenditure, the red ones at the top, but it also includes interest payments and then subsidies and transfers to households, for example, old age pensions. So that is the current expenditure of government. It consists of consumption plus interest payments plus subsidies and transfers. Right, so you have to understand the different types of government expenditure. Here is just a brief overview of expenditure by government as a percentage of GDP. So if we look at final consumption as a percentage of GDP, we can see that that has stayed rather stable at between 19 and a little bit over 20% for this period between 2015 and 2023. We can see that, unfortunately, capital formation as percentage of GDP has been decreasing, and that can be one of the reasons why our economy is not growing. But of course, increasing capital formation means that this final consumption will have to decrease. So it's always a trade-off between the different types of expenditure. And then total spending by the government as percentage of GDP, we can see that that has also stayed rather stable at between 23.8% of GDP going up to 25.6%. But it has not changed much during this period from 2015 to 2023. That's not saying that total spending has not changed. Remember that GDP increases and then total spending also increases. So it stays more or less the same percentage of GDP. Net government revenue consists of two main parts. The first are the direct taxes. They are also called current taxes on income and wealth. And these are the taxes that are levied directly on you and me, on the income or property of people or companies, and include taxes on personal and corporate income, donations, and inheritances. So that is all direct taxes, are taxes on individuals or businesses, while indirect taxes are also called taxes on production and imports, and these taxes are levied on goods and services and include the most well-known example, value-added tax. It also includes custom duties on imports and excise duties on locally produced goods, such as cigarettes and alcoholic beverages. So you have to be able to distinguish between direct taxes and indirect taxes and understand the difference between those two. And once again, an overview of the contribution of taxes, the total taxes as percentage of GDP. We can see that it has also stayed in total more or less, just go back to the previous one, more or less stable between nearly 26% and going up to 27.2. So not a huge change. Total taxes as percentage of GDP. Direct taxes, we can see, so that is the taxes on persons and businesses. We can see that that forms a larger part of total taxation that is collected. It's a little bit over 50%, while indirect taxes forms a smaller part, but not significantly smaller, but it is smaller than direct taxes. If we then also look at the contribution to direct taxes of individuals, we can see that compared to companies, we can see that individuals contribute the largest part to direct taxes, while companies contribute a smaller part. It was decreasing until 2020, then it increased again, and then it started to decrease again. So, of course, this also depends on the profitability of companies. If companies are not making profits, they cannot pay taxes because they pay taxes on their profits. Similar to individuals, if individuals are not earning an income, they cannot pay taxes. So in order for the government to be able to collect taxes, we need an economy that is growing, where individuals are working and paying taxes, and companies are making profit and also paying taxes. So that is an important part of getting an economy to grow, is to figure out how to tax people so that it is worth their while to take jobs and to earn profit, and then to pay the taxes. If we look at how contributions of selected taxes have changed over time in South Africa, we can see that personal income tax has become a much larger percentage of total tax revenue. In the 1980s, it was just below 19%, increased to 40% in 2000, 2001, and decreased again, and it's now increasing again. In the 1980s, tax on gold mines was an important source of revenue. That is sort of non-existent now. Gold mines are not making profit really in South Africa any longer, and they are withdrawing from the country for a large part. And then we can see that tax on companies decreased from the 1980s to 2000, at the same time when this was increasing, and then it started to increase again. Now, there are different arguments regarding tax on individuals and tax on companies. And when we look at economic growth, some people say it is better to not or to tax companies as little as possible, because then the companies can use that profit to invest again and create more employment opportunities. And if they do that, they can create, when more employment opportunities are created, it also means that more people will be paying tax. So the government will also be collecting more personal income tax. So that is the one argument. On the other hand, there is also an argument that says if people have to pay too much personal income tax, they cannot spend, and that affects demand negatively, which means that also, once again, the economy will not grow, because, as you know, economic growth is stimulated by an increase in aggregate demand. Companies are not going to supply goods and services if there's no demand for it, because it will mean they cannot sell it. So there are different ways of looking at the economy and what will affect economic growth in the best way. And that is definitely an aspect on which more research is necessary to determine what is the sort of golden formula with regard to taxes on personal income tax and then also taxes on companies. Then we can see that value added tax was quite low in the 1980s, and then it has increased, but from the 1990s stayed once again rather stable, although it was a little bit higher in 2010, 2011. And then excise duties, we can see that that has increased significantly, and tax levies on fuel is also included here. So we can see that currently that those taxes form quite an important part of the total tax revenue. Then there are also different types of budget balances that we look at. So the first, of course, we have distinguished between a budget surplus and a budget deficit. So a budget surplus is when the government revenue exceeds the government expenditure, and the deficit is when the expenditure exceeds the government revenue. And then the public sector borrowing requirement is equal to the national government's borrowing requirement plus the borrowing requirement of public operations and other quasi-government institutions. So, of course, therefore, the public sector borrowing requirement will normally be significantly larger than the national government's deficit. Remember that picture that we looked at the beginning with the national government in the middle and then the whole public sector. So this is the whole public sector borrowing requirement. And we know that a significant part of government expenditure goes towards funding institutions like the South African Airways and the SABC, etc. So you also have to understand the different budget balances that we consider. So the conventional budget balance is the difference between national government revenue and national government expenditure, as indicated in the Minister of Finance budget speech. As indicated in the previous slide, if expenditure exceeds the revenue, the budget deficit indicates the national government's borrowing requirement. So that's the conventional budget balance. Then we also consider the current budget balance, which is the difference between total current government revenue and total current government expenditure. So capital revenue and expenditure are excluded from the current budget balance. So it only looks at current government revenue and current government expenditure. It excludes capital revenue and expenditure. When there is a current budget surplus, this surplus can then be used to finance capital expenditure projects. So they can then be, after those capital expenditure projects have been financed, it may be that the budget balance is then in deficit, but those were funded from the current budget surplus. So that is sort of the ideal position to be in. To have that revenue available to finance capital expenditure projects. Then the primary budget balance is the difference between total government revenue and total non-interest government expenditure. So this primary budget balance indicates government's ability to pay interest on government debt out of ordinary revenue. So if government's revenue exceeds total non-interest government expenditure, that surplus can be used to pay the interest. So it indicates the government's ability to pay interest on government debt out of ordinary revenue. And we know that government debt is, and interest on government debt forms an important and a large part of government's total expenditure. And then the last type of budget balance that we consider is the structural budget balance, which is really an estimate of what the balances would be in the absence of cyclical influence of government revenue and expenditure. Therefore, it includes cyclically adjusted revenue minus cyclically adjusted expenditure. So that those are estimated amount to just take out the effect of the economic cycles on government revenue and expenditure. So here are some figures where we show total government revenue and expenditure, current government revenue and expenditure, interest expenditure, and then also cyclically adjusted revenue and expenditure. So if we have to calculate the conventional budget balance, that is equal to total government revenue minus total government expenditure. So in this case, 620 minus 650 million. So it was a deficit of 30 million in this case. If you have to calculate the current budget balance, it is the total current government revenue minus total current government expenditure. So in this example, 400 million minus 550 million, and that gives us a deficit of 150 million. Then if we want to calculate the primary budget balance, we first have to calculate total non-interest government expenditure. So that will be equal to total government expenditure minus the interest expenditure. So 650 million minus 250 is then 400 million. And then if we calculate the primary budget balance, it is then the total government revenue minus the non-interest government expenditure. So 620 minus the 400 million gives us 220 million. So that is the primary budget balance, which shows us how much money was available to pay the interest of the government. So we can see that in this case, not adequate, the surplus was not adequate to finance the interest expenditure, which was why there was a deficit of 30 million in the first slide that we looked at here. Right, then the structural budget balance is then easily calculated. The cyclically adjusted revenue minus the cyclically adjusted expenditure. So 370 million minus 600 million is a deficit of 230 million. Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is my discussion on the fiscal indicators that you have to be aware of. Are there any questions at this stage? I saw there's a question. Yes, the slides, as always, will be uploaded after the class in the additional resources folder. Any other questions? I don't see any hands. Are there any hands? Okay, let's then continue to discuss the examination. Okay, so it will be a 2-hour examination, and you will find the information and the examination in your exam timetable. The exam will be an online quiz similar to assessment 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And also remember to do the practice quiz on learning units 3 and 4. Remember, assessment 2 was the written assessment, which was on learning units 3 and 4. So to practice doing quiz questions on learning units 3 and 4, you have to do this practice quiz. So the exam, similar to the assessments that you did, will include true, false questions, multiple choice questions, calculation questions, and find the answer questions. So nothing new, not the same questions, but similar questions. Questions will carry different marks depending on the number of steps that are required to find the answers. True, false questions, and this is quite important to remember, true, false questions and multiple choice questions are marked negatively. That is similar to the assessments. So if you mark an incorrect answer, you actually lose marks. So it's better not to answer if you are unsure of the correct answer. Also remember, especially with multiple choice questions, that there can be more than one answer that is correct. Source documents will be provided to you 1 week before the exam, so we will send that out as an announcement and also create a folder on the exam site where these source documents will be available. Please take time to familiarize yourself with these documents so that you do not waste time to find the required information. Go through them so that you are sure what information is in those documents and where do you find them. The questions will cover all 10 learning units from learning unit 2 to learning unit 11, and there will be about 7 marks from each learning unit. So I've tried to ensure that the marks are sort of more or less equal from each learning unit, adding up to 70 marks in total. As I've indicated, the questions are similar, but not the same as the questions in the learning activities and assessments. And the question papers are based on question pools. So each student received different questions. For example, different values that you have to use. But all questions in the pool test the same knowledge and skills. How will you prepare for the exam? You must work through the learning units and the required sections in the textbook. You must do the learning activities, and you must work through your assessments, including the feedback, and also practice quiz on learning units 3 and 4. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what I have to say to you today. Are there any questions now? There's a question on the chat. Is it mandatory to do the practice quiz on learning units 3 and 4? It's not mandatory at all. Similar to the other assessments, not mandatory at all, but it will definitely be to your advantage. Because if you don't do it, you will not know what types of questions are going to be asked. So that is also to help you prepare. Similarly, it's not mandatory to study. It is an open book exam, similar to the assessments. In this module, we do not do closed book exams because that is, I'm not here trying to make sure that you can learn things off by heart. We want to see that you understand the work and that you know what to do it. That does not mean that you should not study, hey? you should, when I say study, you should practice. That is what you should do. Do the learning activities, do the assessments. That is how you prepare for an economics exam. Open book means that you can use any information, but you must do your own work. You are not allowed to get help from any other person. That is what open book means. You can use any information from anywhere, but you are not allowed to get help from external people, from other people. No other person is allowed to help you. Yes, I've indicated that I will make the resources available 1 week before the exam takes place. Yeah, I'm sorry about the challenge of negative marking, but unfortunately, if we don't do that and we have multiple choice questions, it means that if you just mark everything, that your answer will be fully correct. So that is why we have to mark negatively. You are not, if there's only one option that's correct, it is different. But if there are more than one option that is correct, of course, we have to penalize you. We do not want to see if you can guess correctly. Any other questions? I see there's a hand up or a tile.
Ma'am?
Yes.
Morning. I wanted to inquire about my assessment 2 marks because I still haven't received my marks. And on the grading status, it's written submit for moderation. So I'm unclear what's going on.
Did you check it yesterday?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, because I thought I sent everything out yesterday. I was away on leave, as you all know, or most of you know. I only returned yesterday, and I sent those out. The other lecturers could not manage to send it out, and I thought I sent it out. Uritile, can you send me your student number, or can you give it to me now? Then I can have a look and then get back to you.
Okay, ma'am, I'll email it to you.
Well, you are going to email it to me. Okay, please do that. And then it like I say, I thought it was available now. I did it actually twice yesterday. So it does seem to me there is an issue with the system. But if you send it to me, your details, then at least I'll be able to tell you your mark and provide the feedback to you by email. Any other questions? Okay. Any other questions? Okay, how many questions approximately will be in the exam? I think it is 35 questions, but I may be not be fully correct. It can be 34 or 36, but it's round about there. So it is, yeah, it's about 2 marks per question, but as I've indicated, it is not exactly 2 marks per question. Some questions count more and some questions count less. Oh, and thank you for the compliments. I really appreciate that. I must say, for me, this was quite a difficult semester. I had not been, this is the first semester that I was part of the lecturing team for this module. And it was quite a challenge because there was an external site where all the information was supposed to be available, and then suddenly it wasn't working. So I had to sort of work through the nights to get your learning units up and running. As you saw, it came bit by bit. It wasn't there all at the same time. So, but you have all been great, and yeah, I really felt supported by students as well. So I would like to thank you for that. It's been a great semester for me, and it was great working with you this semester. Please note that we are available for you for questions. If you have questions while you are studying now, please ask. We are there. The tutor is there. She's also, I think you will agree that she's really on the ball. She answers students very quickly, and she gives extensive answers. So please, if you have any questions, you can ask by email, you can call us by phone, or you can ask on the discussion forums. We will answer you in any of those places. Sipukasi, unless otherwise stated, rounding will always be to 1 decimal. That's correct. 100% correct, but I will give those those guidelines will also be at the beginning of the exam again. Remember, no spaces and a full stop, not a comma. Those are actually the 3 rules. Gentlemen, then if there are no other questions, I am grateful that you have been here. And as I've said to you, it has been a pleasure to teach you. I really felt supported through this semester by the students. Sometimes I felt that I was sort of learning with you. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this module. I think it is a very practical module, and you are going to find that when you go on with economics, that you are going to use a lot of what you have learned in this module when you become an economist, because you will think back to where did I find the information, and think back to your textbook economic indicators. Please don't sell it, please keep it. Okay, I see someone said there's a problem. She sent the assignment 2 via email. Okay, so that was probably while I was away. So I did not check students' emails that were sent during the time that I was away, because of course it was more, if I had to do that, I would sit for another 3 weeks, even though I had only 2 weeks leave, just to answer all those emails. So please send it to me again, and then I will have a look. Okay. Okay, at postgraduate level, you will use the information that you learned here, and you will do research using this information, and find relationships between the different variables, and try to determine how economic growth, fiscal indicators, money market indicators, capital market indicators, all the different indicators are related. So definitely you will use it in future if you continue with your studies in economics. Right, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any more questions, as I've indicated, please ask, send us, you can contact us in different ways, and we'll be sure to provide feedback as soon as possible. I wish you all of the best with the exam, and I hope not to see you again next semester, but maybe on honors level, where I'm also involved. So maybe I will see you again in the future, but hopefully not next semester. Bye-bye. And thank you for everything.